2 Minute Drill podcast time. I'm Jim Monaghan along with Chris Swendeman. And in just a couple of minutes, Chris, we're going to bring in Chris Myers, who has a really, really good new book out. We'll be talking about that. But first, let's get to a topic. In fact, I'm going to ask Chris about this when we get a chance to talk with him. And that is Super Bowl coming up. And a lot of people just have no interest whatsoever in watching this game. If you're not a Chiefs fan, if you're not an Eagles fan, odds are you're on social media complaining, not my Super Bowl. In the meantime, what we have here is greatness in front of us, or at least the possibility of greatness, with the Chiefs possibly going to win their third Super Bowl in a row. It is unprecedented, and all we're talking about is, oh, Mahomes gets all the calls. Oh, the NFL wants the Chiefs to win, and all of that nonsense. Meanwhile, we are witnessing the possibility of greatness. And I'll admit it, I don't want the Chiefs to win this weekend for a variety of reasons, one of which is I'm tired of them. But we don't appreciate greatness when it's right there in front of us.
Yeah, Jim, you know what it is? We like you when you win, but then you win too much, and we're like, all right, we're all done with you now. Just go. We're done. We've had enough of you. Next, we want the next underdog. We don't like when you win too much. And you're favored. Then all of a sudden it becomes like passe. Like we're over it. We just get fatigued of you winning. What the Chiefs could do this weekend is something we've never seen. Not the Steelers, not the San Francisco 49ers, not the Dallas Cowboys, not the Packers, and any and all powerhouse, not the New England Patriots.
Nope.
I mean, these are the greats of the great of all time. And what we're witnessing could be something that's never been done in the history of the NFL. And what are we doing? Oh, if Mahomes sells us one more bundle, I mean, come on. What are we? I mean, give this team a break. Give it just a little chance to sit there and say, you are watching something that nobody, for all the years the NFL has been around, they could pull off something that's never been done before. I think it's cool.
And without any further ado, let's bring in our special guest. We're joined today by Chris Myers, the Emmy award-winning sports journalist who has a brand new book out called That Deserves a Wow: Untold Stories of Legends and Champions, Their Wins and Heartbreaks. Chris, when I was going through the book, I went and looked at the chapters, and the first one that caught my eye as a Red Sox fan was, "Why not us?" And that quote, of course, coming from Curt Schilling. And there were a couple of quotes that stood out in that chapter, Chris. We love the long shots, the impossible odds, the teams and players who never give up no matter how bad it looks. And a little later on, you say, we love the misfits, the rebels who march to the beat of a different drum. With that in mind, why is it, and I'm thinking in terms of the Kansas City Chiefs and how many people are just so upset that they're back in the
Yes.
Super Bowl. Why don't we appreciate greatness when it's right in front of our eyes?
Yeah, I maybe there's a little bit of jealousy or a little bit of how come they get it all and my team doesn't, or they win all the time and my team doesn't. But I think too, how I grew up was a little bit of I kind of saw myself, and I think athletes. I learned this from athletes. Some play better. If they don't have a chip on their shoulder, they create one. And I saw myself kind of as a little bit of an underdog, a little bit of a rebel. So I would, through sports and covering whether it was ESPN or Fox. It's funny, I would get those teams or those players and latch onto them a little bit and root for them a little bit more. So it's a good question. Why? I think it's more an individual question. I don't want a grand scale for this. The Chiefs, and I saw it with the Patriots when they were winning, and that was greatness with Brady and Belichick. People just say, enough of them. I want somebody to buy. And then later they look back and they say, boy, I was around when they won 3 out of 4 or they won 3 in a row. So it's just a vibe, I think, a feel. It's the fan that's inside of all of us, I think, that responds that way.
And I have to admit, I'm part of that, group of people that I'm just tired of the Chiefs and Mahomes, even though I know I'm seeing greatness right in front of me. But I'm part of that group. Guilty as charged.
Yeah, I think we are if we would admit it. But the idea that not only are they winning, but then you see Mahomes on every commercial, and now you got Andy Reid, who's not really a guy you want to see in commercials, joking around, but you see him there too. So, and then there's that Taylor Swift effect. So there's a reason there that some people might, hey, this is more interesting. That other people are like just the antagonist. enough with that. But it'll be up to the Eagles, who I think can win the game. I think it'll be a fun game. It was a great one when they played 2 years ago. So whoever you're rooting for, I think it should be entertaining.
So, Chris, one of the great stories I love about the book is how you got your start. And, you've spoken to and interviewed some of the greatest legends in sports. Now, you fast forward to a time when with social media, and there are so many different platforms available for sports discussions. What advice are you giving a young Chris Myers or any aspiring sportscaster for that matter, looking to break into the business? Is it easier, same, or different?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably more difficult, but there are more ways to at least get yourself heard, to say, hey, I'm over here just because of what you said, through social media, through YouTube. You can create your own podcast, your own channel. An internship was a great way in back in the day. It still is through colleges, because you're placed in a company ahead of, whether it's a Fox or an ESPN, or even with teams now that have their own websites, ahead of people a little bit because of the school, and you have a chance to observe, and then you can say, hey, I can work part-time, or you can hire me because I showed you I could do this. So that's that part of it. So I think there's more of a platform, but it's always been competitive, and I think it's even more competitive for that reason. I'm amazed of how many people I think are talented and interviewers that can sharpen their skills there, their commentary, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the advice I would have was, be as authentic as you can, and try to, and hopefully that gives you a chance to work and prepare, but that shows that you're a little bit different, because we're not all created equal. The way we think, the way we call a game, and then people are going to like you or not like you the way we do an interview or not. That would probably be it. But it's also very competitive from an athlete standpoint, an ex-athlete. They're out there honing their craft through social media as well, and more. They always were entering the field. I think more and more they are in there quicker, and from all levels, not just the star of a team, but the backup lineman can get a break and break through as well.
You just mentioned Andy Reid, and there's in fact a chapter on Andy in the book. And one of the quotes from there is, we all want to understand what it's like to get there. And that theme, Chris, I think goes through the entire book with everyone you interviewed. And as Chris Swendeman just alluded to, your own story. I mean, basically in college told, hey, kid, you got a face for radio. And look where you are now. It's one hurdle after another. And again, I think it kind of goes back to what I had mentioned to you before, appreciating greatness when it's right in front of our eyes. Jerry Rice talks about, I just felt like I had never arrived. That, I don't know if it's a chip on the shoulder, Brady with Deflategate, you being told by a professor, kid, don't think about television. That's a running theme throughout the book.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys reading the book and some of these lines, because in writing it, a lot of these things came back to me. That wasn't my purpose. It was like, hey, I've been at all these different sporting events and interviewed all these different outstanding athletes and personalities. And after a decade at ESPN and what I call the golden years, the growth years, fortunate to be there at a great time, and then going to Fox, where they just had the NFL and then added everything else. But yes, through it all, I was determined, and just kind of used. And I love radio. I started in radio doing call-in sports talk shows, which have changed now as well, with the way you have to be. I don't know, just argumentative almost. I mean, you can still have a strong opinion and not be somebody who is worried about being more interesting than they are being factual or accurate. But yes, that's it's funny in over the long path of a career, where the situations you're placed in, but it's been a fun ride, and it still is. I mean, that part of it never gets old, because of the people in it and because of the sports that I love.
Chris, I got to ask you, for somebody who puts so much prep, and in the book you go into great detail about how much prep you do and to get prepared for an interview, when now you're on the other end of the desk and you're the interviewee, do you put in a lot of prep, or what goes through your mind? And now you're on the other end of the desk, so to speak, and you're fielding questions versus preparing to ask them.
Yeah, because it's a different feeling, and I try not to think of myself asking the questions. And I like it that I didn't know what kind of questions you were going to ask. I just know that what I wrote in the book, I mean, were all actual events, and I try to make sure I explain those in the best way I can. I assume that's what you're going to ask, unless you want to ask opinions about other things. But I almost like being surprised sometimes not a gotcha question, but a question that gets me to think, that something that I haven't heard before asked. And I try to do that when I was doing interviews in the preparation too. Again, I'm not going to ambush anybody. And again, I mentioned in the book, and I don't know if you guys related at all, that movie where I took the line from, and I used it, that my goal of interviewing Ali at age 16 to start out as a teenager, and then going from there to other people, the greats in the business, was treat the regular guy like like a star, like a famous guy, and the famous guy like a regular guy. And that way, you're not intimidated, and you also, the other way is, you don't overlook anybody who might still be interesting or have a story to kind of tell. So yeah, this is a different side of it, and I love talking about sports. I love talking to people about the industry, which has grown and been fascinating through the 4 or 5 decades when I started, and how I started, and so yeah, I best I can prepare is at least review the kinds of things I wrote in the book, and the people that I spent time with.
The two coaches this weekend have something in common, in addition to being head coaches of teams that have made it to the Super Bowl. Eagles fans wanted both of them fired.
Yes. And they're very different personalities. Andy's very likable. You sit in TV production meetings, having covered them, and Andy, he's conversational, friendly, but he never really gives you anything juicy for the broadcast. Whereas Sirianni is, he's not the kind of guy on the sideline that I think annoys people. And I don't know if it's because he acts like a player or acts like a fan sometimes, and maybe some of his players enjoy that about him. But that seems to annoy other fans. But he's not that way in person. He doesn't come off as, let's just say, as cocky or agitating in that regard when you sit and talk to him privately. So it's not an act. I just think when he gets out there, his adrenaline flows, his emotions, and he's fired up. And I do think that's the edge. It's like, you look at this game, if I could just think about the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles, on paper, you look statistically, and the talent in the trenches, my God, they have the talent edge in every area, except quarterback and maybe coach. And that's not demeaning what the Eagles have. It's just the advantage of Mahomes and Reed, what they've done, where they've been, and how they're still at the peak of their game. And ultimately, that's kind of what decides games, which is why the Chiefs have won 17 straight one-score games. So that's, I don't know which way the game's going to go, but I know it'll be entertaining.
The book is called That Deserves a Wow: Untold Stories of Legends and Champions, Their Wins and Heartbreaks, by Chris Myers. Chris, thank you so much for your time here with us, and best of luck with the book. It's a great read.
Yep. Thank you, Jim and Chris. I really enjoyed the interest. You guys take care.
You too, Chris. Thank you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
A lot of fun talking with Chris Myers and his brand new book here on the 2-Minute Drill podcast. So, Swendeman, let's go back to something we mentioned really, really early on, and we actually talked about it with Chris Myers just a few minutes ago, and that is the Chiefs being favored by the officials. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but on Tuesday, Goodell came out and said the officials and the league are not favoring the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, perception's reality. We've talked about that before. But when the commissioner has to come out and say this, like we said a few weeks ago, there are some concerns.
There's definitely concerns because, everybody has been talking about it. And whether you like it or not, it fits the narrative for people. It's nice to, want to yell and scream. You're mad that Kansas City keeps winning, and everybody's just looking for an excuse. But it's picked up so much, where there's smoke, there's fire, of course. So it's picked up so much momentum that the commissioner of the league actually has to address it. I don't remember it ever being this bad with a team, being said that they get all the calls, that the commissioner has had to make a statement about it during, the week of the big game. But listen, it's more perception than reality. It's all it is.
All right. So with that said, who do you think wins on Sunday?
I think history is going to be made. I think it's going to be closer than people would probably like, especially Kansas City fans. But I think KC is going to pull off the three-peat.
Well, listen, Kansas City's been doing this all season long. One-score games, right? One-possession games. So that wouldn't be a surprise at all. I think the Eagles have been built for this game specifically to take down Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. I really do. We were talking with Chris Myers just a few minutes earlier. It's not lost on me that the Philadelphia fan base at one point or another has wanted both of these coaches fired. And here they are facing each other on Sunday. We could be seeing history. I actually hope we don't. I'm guilty. I am. I'm guilty. I'm tired. I'm tired of the insurance commercials. I'm tired of Taylor Swift. I'm just tired of it. And listen, Mahomes is an amazing athlete. Travis Kelce, one of the best tight ends of all time. Andy Reid, a phenomenal coach. I'm just done. I'm done.
It's okay to have Chiefs Kingdom fatigue. I get it. I just personally, number one, you're never going to get me to ever pick a team from Philly to actually have to root for. I'm so sorry to all my friends that are Philly fans, and I have a lot of them. They know I love them, but it's not happening. But this team, I would just love to say, I watched the Super Bowl where I really had no rooting interest for either team, but I watched history made. I mean, I'm just enthralled by the fact that they could actually three-peat, and they're literally one game away from pulling off a feat that no other team has done.
And we will talk about that in next week's episode of the 2 Minute Drill podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and like and all those other things so we can keep on doing this. Swendeman, we'll see what happens. Maybe history, maybe not. We'll talk next week.
You got it, Jim. Maybe we'll get you into bundling your home and auto.